The sharp, relentless chime of the doorbell shattered the fragile stillness of the early morning. Nora stirred groggily, her head heavy and her limbs resistant, clinging to the warmth of her bed like it was her only refuge. The pounding on the door grew louder, more insistent, each knock resonating like an unwelcome echo through her small apartment. With a groan, she forced herself upright, leaning against the wall for balance, her feet dragging reluctantly across the cold floor. She didn't bother with the peephole. It didn't matter who stood outside. Whatever awaited her on the other side couldn't disrupt her life more than it already was. Nora unlocked the door, her body aching with exhaustion, and found herself face to face with Claire, her closest friend, a striking woman who could turn heads in any room. Claire looked flawless even at this ungodly hour, her golden curls perfectly styled, her makeup impeccable, and her tailored trench coat cinched around her petite frame. "You're alive," Claire declared with mock relief, brushing past Nora without waiting for an invitation. Her high heels clicked against the worn hardwood floor as she entered. "I've been calling you since yesterday. Honestly, Nora, you're impossible. I get it. Work tires you out during the week. But are you ignoring me on a Friday night? That's new." She set her designer bag on the counter with a dramatic flair, her words tumbling like an avalanche. "Don't tell me your man has started pulling his tyrant routine again. What was his name? Eric? Brock? Whatever. Did he finally forbid you from talking to me?" Nora closed the door and leaned against it, her energy depleted. "He's gone, Claire," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that stopped Claire mid-rant. "Gone?" Claire's perfectly arched brows shot up, her tone sharp with disbelief. "You mean to tell me that Eric, or Brock, or whatever his ridiculous name is, left you? Just like that?" Nora nodded, sinking onto the nearest stool in the kitchen. Her voice was flat, her words devoid of emotion, as if speaking them aloud made the betrayal less accurate. "It doesn't matter. He's gone and I'm fine." But Claire wasn't buying it. Her vivid green eyes narrowed, brimming with the protective fire of a friend who had seen too much and trusted too little. "That self-absorbed parasite," she muttered, more to herself than to Nora. "You deserved so much better." Nora looked away, unwilling to meet Claire's gaze. The truth was too raw, too painful to face yet. And in that moment, the unspoken history between them filled the silence, a reminder of all the warnings Nora had ignored. Claire paced the kitchen, her heels clicking rhythmically on the tile floor, as if she needed the motion to absorb Nora's words. Her face was a mixture of frustration and concern, the expression only a best friend could wear. "Gone? What do you mean, gone? What happened?" she asked, leaning against the counter, her arms crossed. Nora's fingers traced the edge of the coffee mug, sitting untouched on the counter. She stared into its empty depths as though the swirling thoughts in her mind might pour into it. "He packed his things last Sunday," she murmured. "Came home late, like he's been doing for months, and just started throwing his clothes into a suitcase. Said something about meeting someone else, about us being a mistake." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on, determined not to let tears betray her. "Then he left. Just like that." Claire's mouth fell open, her usual sharp wit momentarily failing her. "He had the nerve to do that? After everything you gave him? After all the sacrifices you made?" Her voice grew louder with each word, her indignation filling the room. "What kind of man walks out on a woman like you? Oh, let me guess. The same man who was too proud to pay his way but not too proud to drive your car, live in your apartment, and mooch off your hard-earned money." "Claire," Nora said softly, but her friend was on a roll. "No, let me finish," Claire snapped, wagging a manicured finger in Nora's direction. "This isn't just about him leaving. It's about how he used you. From the moment I met him, I knew something was off. Remember when I asked about his job? He gave me some vague nonsense about being a high-level executive trying to save his company from bankruptcy. But somehow, I never saw him working, or paying for anything, for that matter." Nora's shoulders slumped under the weight of Claire's words, even though she knew they were true. She had fallen for Brock's charm, smooth words, and seemingly boundless confidence. And she had believed him when he promised her a future filled with love and adventure. She had overlooked the inconsistencies and the red flags because she had wanted so badly to believe in the dream he painted. I thought love meant supporting each other, Nora said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. I thought he'd come around if I just gave him time. He promised me he'd propose, Claire. Si said we would have a wedding in Bali or the Mediterranean once things settled. I didn't care about the fancy wedding. I just wanted to be with him. Claire let out a bitter laugh. Bali? Mediterranean? Please. That man couldn't afford a backyard barbecue or an international wedding. And he knew you'd wait forever, didn't he? Because that's what people like him do. They prey on people like you. Kind, generous, trusting people. Nora flinched, but she didn't argue. She couldn't. Every word Claire said hit like a truth she had been too afraid to face. Claire sighed, her tone softening as she crouched next to Nora. Listen to me, Nora. You are brilliant. You graduated at the top of our class. You're one of the best economists at your company. You're smart, capable, and beautiful. Don't let him take that from you. Don't let him win. Nora looked up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I feel so stupid, Claire. I let him walk all over me, and now I don't even know who I am anymore. Claire reached out and squeezed her hand. You're still you, Nora, and you're going to be fine. But first, we're going to pick up the pieces. Together. Claire wasn't one to wallow in problems. She was a woman of action, and today was no exception. She clapped her hands together, her eyes blazing with determination. Right. Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to take a long, hot bath. Then, we're going out. Out. Nora echoed, her voice filled with disbelief. I can barely get out of bed, Claire. I'm not going anywhere. Oh, yes, you are, Claire countered, pulling Nora to her feet. You've spent the past week mourning that pathetic excuse of a man, and it's over. You're going to wash him out of your system starting today. No arguments. Too tired to fight back, Nora let Claire lead her to the bathroom. The warm water felt like a balm on her weary body, soothing muscles that had been tense for days. By the time she emerged, wrapped in a plush robe, she felt lighter, if only just. Back in the living room, Claire had taken over completely. A steaming mug of coffee alongside a plate of toast waited on the table. Drink that. Eat something. You're going to need your strength. Claire, I don't think, Nora began, but Claire cut her off. No thinking, just doing, she said firmly. We're going to the salon, then the mall, and then we're getting lunch at that fancy new restaurant downtown. You're going to let yourself feel good again. Trust me. Nora sighed, knowing it was pointless to argue. Claire was a force of nature, and once she set her mind to something, there was no stopping her. The salon was their first stop, a haven of soft lighting and soothing music. Nora sat stiffly as a stylist worked magic on her hair, trimming away the tired strands and transforming her dull brown locks into sleek waves. Nora glimpsed herself in the mirror as the stylist added the finishing touches. For the first time in months, she didn't look like a woman burdened by heartbreak and exhaustion. She looked alive. Claire, of course, was delighted. Now that's the Nora I know, she said triumphantly. Just wait until we get you into some new clothes. Claire dragged Nora from boutique to boutique at the mall, her energy seemingly endless. At first, Nora resisted, reluctant to try on the trendy outfits Claire picked out. But as the hours passed, something shifted. She began to enjoy the process, laughing as Claire forced her into a pair of sky-high heels or an overly extravagant dress. By the time they left, laden with shopping bags, Nora felt a strange but welcome sense of accomplishment. Lunch at the restaurant was the final piece of Claire's plan. Over plates of gourmet pasta and glasses of sparkling water, the two women talked and laughed, their conversation light and free of the shadows looming over Nora's life. For the first time in weeks, she felt like herself again, or at least like someone she could learn to be. As they left the restaurant, Claire linked arms with her. See? I told you. You're stronger than you think, Nora. You just needed a little push. Nora smiled a slight but genuine smile. For the first time, she thought maybe Claire was right. That evening, Nora stood before her closet, staring at the new red dress Claire had practically forced her to buy. The rich fabric shimmered under the soft glow of her bedroom light, promising elegance and confidence she didn't feel. "I can't do this," she muttered under her breath. "Of course you can," Claire called from the living room. "Stop doubting yourself and get dressed. We're going to have fun tonight. And don't even think about wearing flats." Nora sighed, slipping into the dress and stepping into a pair of suede heels. When she finally emerged, Claire's jaw dropped. "See? I told you. You look incredible. Now, let's go show the world." The club was everything Nora didn't expect. Flashing lights, throbbing music, and a sea of fashionable patrons filled the space. Claire easily navigated through the crowd, her confidence cutting through the chaos like a beacon. On the other hand, Nora clung to her friend's side, overwhelmed by the room's energy. "Relax," Claire said, handing Nora a drink. "Just take it all in. We're here to have fun, not overthink everything." As Nora sipped her cocktail, she noticed two men at the bar glancing their way. One was tall with sandy hair, his easygoing smile lighting up the room. The other, darker and more reserved, exuded a quiet intensity that made her heart skip a beat. Before she could turn away, the taller man approached their table with a charming grin. "Ladies, would you mind if two humble wanderers joined your company?" he asked with a playful bow. Claire, ever the social butterfly, replied without missing a beat. "That depends. Are your intentions honorable?" "Completely," he said, gesturing to his friend. "This is Adrian, and I'm Daniel. We're just here for good company and good conversation." Claire smiled. "Well then, be our guests." As Daniel and Claire launched into an easy banter, Adrian sat across from Nora. "You seem quieter than your friend," he observed, his deep voice cutting through the noise around them. Nora hesitated, unsure how to respond. "She's more outgoing than I am." "That's not a bad thing," Adrian said, his dark eyes meeting hers. "It just means I'll have to work harder to get to know you." His words sent a flush of warmth through Nora, and for the first time that night, she felt a spark of something she couldn't quite name. As the evening progressed, the group's laughter mingled with the music, and Nora found herself relaxing under Adrian's attentive gaze. When the DJ switched to a slower song, Adrian extended his hand. "Care to dance?" Then, buoyed by Claire's encouraging nod, Nora hesitated but took his hand. On the dance floor, the world seemed to fade away. Adrian's touch was gentle but firm, his movements confident yet unassuming. Nora felt seen for the first time in a long time, not as a woman recovering from heartbreak, but as someone worth knowing. Nora's initial nerves had vanished when the club began to thin out. She and Adrian returned to the table to find Claire and Daniel in a lively debate about the merits of classic rock versus modern pop. "Your friend is quite something," Adrian said, nodding toward Claire with an amused smile. "She's unique," Nora replied, laughing softly. "But she means well." "And you? What about you, Nora?" The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine. "What about me?" Adrian leaned closer, his voice low. "What do you want? Right now, in this moment?" Nora froze, unsure how to answer. What did she want? A reprieve from her past? A glimpse of hope for her future? Before she could overthink it, Claire interrupted. "Time to go," Claire announced, gathering her things with a dramatic flourish. "It's late, and some of us have work tomorrow." Daniel groaned. "Spoil sport." Claire winked at him. "Call me tomorrow if you're serious about that coffee." As they made their way out of the club, Adrian walked alongside Nora. "Can I see you again?" he asked quietly. The question caught her off guard, but before she could answer, Claire swooped in. "Of course, she'll see you again. Call her." She pressed a slip of paper into Adrian's hand with a knowing smile. "Claire," Nora protested, but her friend just laughed. "It's called taking a chance, Nora. Trust me, you won't regret it." Later, at her apartment, Nora replayed the evening in her mind. Adrian's laugh, his gaze, and the warmth of his hand on hers all lingered, filling the empty spaces Brock had left behind. As she slipped out of her heels and into bed, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: hope. The following day, her phone buzzed with a message. "Last night was unforgettable. Let me know when you're free, Adrian." Nora stared at the screen, her heart fluttering. For the first time, she wondered if Claire was right. Monday morning came too quickly, dragging Nora from the sanctuary of her thoughts and into the cold reality of her office. The hum of computers and shuffle of papers filled the space as she sank into her desk chair, trying to ignore the ache of anticipation that had built over the weekend. Adrian hadn't messaged again, and while she told herself she wasn't expecting him to, the small hope she'd been nurturing felt fragile. The hours slipped by as Nora buried herself in spreadsheets and financial reports. Her company was amid a vital audit, and her department's success depended heavily on the economic plan she'd been tasked to develop. By mid-morning, her manager called for an all-hands meeting to introduce the auditors from head office who would be reviewing their work. Team, her manager began as the room fell silent. Let me introduce Mr. Adrian Blackwell and Mr. Daniel Reed. They'll be conducting our review this week. Nora's heart stopped. Her head snapped up, her eyes locked onto Adrian as he entered the conference room. He looked effortlessly professional in a tailored suit, his usual effortless charm replaced with a businesslike demeanor. Standing beside him, Daniel wore his usual grin, but Adrian's gaze was scanning the room until it landed on her. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. His eyes widened, and a flicker of surprise crossed his face before he schooled his expression into one of polite neutrality. On the other hand, Nora felt her pulse quicken as her mind raced. Of all the people, of all the places, why here? Ms. Nora Ellis, her manager said, gesturing toward her, is our lead economist. She's responsible for the strategic plan you'll be reviewing. Adrian's lips quirked into the faintest smiles as he inclined his head in acknowledgement. I look forward to seeing your work, Ms. Ellis, he said, his voice steady but laced with a hint of something only she could detect. Nora's cheeks burned, but she managed to nod. Thank you, she replied, her tone clipped. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur as she fought to focus on anything other than the weight of Adrian's presence in the room. Nora had retreated to her office by lunchtime, trying to gather her composure. A knock at her door startled her. Before she could respond, it opened to reveal Adrian. Got you, he said with a slight, mischievous grin as he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Now, will you tell me why you've been avoiding me? Nora crossed her arms, leaning against her desk. I wasn't avoiding you, she said defensively. I just didn't expect you to show up here. Neither did I, he admitted, his expression softening. But fate has a funny way of working, doesn't it? She sighed, the tension easing slightly. Adrian, this isn't the place to talk about whatever this is. Fair enough, he said, holding up his hands. But how about dinner? Tonight. There is no pressure, just two people talking. What do you say? Nora hesitated, but the earnestness in his eyes was hard to resist. Fine, she said at last. But just dinner. Adrian smiled, the kind of smile that made her knees weak. Just dinner, he promised. That evening, Nora sat across from Adrian at a cozy Italian restaurant, the warm glow of candlelight softening the space between them. She had chosen a simple yet elegant dress that felt like a quiet statement of confidence, though her nerves threatened to undo her. Adrian, however, was as composed as ever. He ordered a bottle of wine and leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes studying her with curiosity and affection. You're full of surprises, he said, his voice low and intimate. At the club, I thought you were shy. But today, watching you present your work, you're anything but. Nora felt her cheeks warm. Work is different, she said, fiddling with her napkin. Focusing on numbers and strategies is easier than people. Then let's focus on numbers, Adrian teased, his grin disarming. What are the chances you'll let me see you again after tonight? Nora laughed despite herself, the tension in her chest easing. That depends, she replied. Are you always this charming, or is it just part of the job? Only when it matters, he said, his tone serious. And Nora, this matters to me. The sincerity in his words caught her off guard. She let herself relax for a moment and enjoy being seen and valued, not for her work or ability to hold things together, but simply for who she was. The evening passed in a blur of laughter and conversation, each moment building a bridge between them. When Adrian walked her to her door, he hesitated, his hand lingering on hers. I meant what I said earlier, he told her. You're incredible, Nora. And I'm not just saying that because of your spreadsheets. Nora smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Good night, Adrian. Good night, he said softly, his gaze lingering as she stepped inside. That night, Nora lay in bed, her mind swirling with thoughts of Adrian. He was nothing like Brock. No manipulation, empty promises, just honesty and a quiet strength that made her feel safe. For the first time, she wondered if this was worth exploring, if she could finally let go of her past and take a chance on something new. As she drifted off to sleep, her phone buzzed with a message. Thank you for tonight. Sleep well, Nora. Adrian. She smiled, her heart fluttering. Maybe, just maybe, Claire had been right all along. The following Saturday, Nora decided to talk to clear her mind. The crisp autumn air filled the streets with a faint scent of fallen leaves, and sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled patterns on the pavement. She felt lighter and freer, as if her time with Adrian had peeled away layers of self-doubt and hesitation. She turned the corner near her apartment and froze. There, sitting on the steps of her building, was Ryan. His once meticulously styled hair was disheveled, and his clothes, though still fashionable, looked wrinkled and worn. He was smoking a cigarette, something he'd always claimed to detest. Nora, he called out when he saw her, a half-smile curling his lips. Long time no see. Her stomach churned, but she kept her face neutral. What are you doing here, Ryan? I've been thinking about you, he said, standing up and dusting off his jeans. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have left. Nora crossed her arms, her voice icy. A mistake? You didn't just leave, Ryan. You discarded me like I was nothing. He stepped closer, his expression softening in what she once might have mistaken for sincerity. I was stupid, Nora. I got caught up in my head, thinking I needed something else. But now I see that I had everything I needed with you. She shook her head, disbelief mingling with anger. You're only here because things didn't work out with whoever you left me for. Am I supposed to welcome you back with open arms? Ryan's jaw tightened. I didn't come here to fight. I came here to fix things. Nora let out a bitter laugh. Fix things? Ryan, there's nothing to fix. I've moved on. You should too. Before he could reply, the door to the building opened and Adrian stepped out, a bag of takeout in one hand. He stopped short when he saw Ryan, his sharp eyes quickly assessing the situation. Everything okay here, Nora? Adrian asked, his tone calm but firm. Ryan turned to face him, his expression darkening. Who's this? Your replacement? None of your business, Nora snapped. And I don't owe you an explanation. Adrian stepped forward, his presence steady and unyielding. You heard her. It's time for you to go. Ryan looked as if he might argue momentarily, but something in Adrian's gaze made him back down. He turned to Nora, his face a mixture of anger and regret. You'll regret this, he muttered before walking away. Adrian waited until Ryan was out of sight before turning to Nora. Are you okay? She nodded, though her hands trembled. Thank you. I wasn't expecting him to show up like that. Adrian set the bag down and took her hands in his. You no longer have to face him, or anything, alone. I'm here. Nora felt a surge of warmth that melted away the last remnants of fear Ryan had left behind. Thank you, she whispered. As the days turned into weeks, Adrian and Nora's bond deepened. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, their lives slowly intertwining. Adrian's gestures, always thoughtful, spoke volumes. He brought her coffee during late work nights, left little notes in her bag, and listened intently to her every word. Their evenings together were a blend of light-hearted laughter and quiet intimacy. Adrian would cook dinner, ensuring his mother's recipes were superior to any restaurant. Nora would sit at the counter, watching him with admiration and affection. After dinner, they'd curl up on the couch, sharing stories about their pasts or simply enjoying each other's presence. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through the park, Nora noticed a couple sitting on a bench, their laughter echoing through the stillness. For the first time, she didn't feel a pang of envy. She had that now, a real connection grounded in mutual respect and care. But alongside the joy, a new fear began to creep in. Adrian's business trip was nearing its end, and the thought of him leaving felt like a weight on her chest. She told herself to cherish their moments and focus on the present, but the uncertainty of their future loomed large. Adrian, perceptive as always, noticed her quietness. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked one night as they sat on her couch, his arm draped around her shoulders. Nora hesitated before speaking. "I'm happy," she said softly, "but I'm scared too. Scared that this will end when you leave." Adrian turned to face her, his expression serious. "Do you think I could just walk away from this? From you?" She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. "I don't know. People leave, Adrian. That's what they do." He gently lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Not me," he said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." The conviction in his voice brought tears to her eyes. She allowed herself to believe this could be different from the time. As their time together drew close, Adrian planned one final evening to mark their last night before his departure. He took her to an elegant restaurant with candlelit tables and soft music playing in the background. Nora couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming but couldn't put her finger on what. After dessert, Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. "Nora," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "There's something I need to say." Her heart raced as he continued, "I've fallen in love with you, and I don't want to leave you behind. Come with me. Let's build something together, wherever life takes us." Nora's breath caught. She had spent so much time guarding her heart, convincing herself not to hope, that hearing his words felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll come with you." Adrian smiled, his eyes glistening as he leaned across the table to kiss her. In that moment, the uncertainty melted away, leaving only the promise of a new beginning. The days leading up to their departure were a whirlwind of preparations. Nora found herself juggling work, packing, and emotional goodbyes, all while grappling with the enormity of her decision. Claire was by her side every step of the way, alternating between fierce protectiveness and tearful sentiments. "You're going," Claire said one evening as she helped Nora box up her apartment. She paused, holding a framed photo of the two of them from their college days. "It's like the end of an era." Nora smiled softly, taking the photo from her friend's hands and placing it in a keep box. "It's not the end, Claire. It's just a new chapter." "Well, this new chapter better include phone calls, visits, and updates on every detail of your life," Claire demanded, her tone half serious. "I mean it, Nora. If you disappear on me, I'll hunt you down." "I wouldn't dare," Nora teased, pulling Claire into a hug. "You're my best friend. No distance can change that." When the day of the move finally arrived, Nora's father came to help with the last-minute details. He was quiet, showing his love through actions rather than words. He paused to look at her as he loaded boxes into the moving truck. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice gruff but gentle. Nora nodded, her confidence unwavering. "I am, Dad. Adrian. He makes me feel like I can finally be myself. Like I deserve happiness." Her father nodded, a small smile breaking through his stoic expression. "Then I'm happy for you." That evening, Adrian arrived to take Nora to the airport. He stepped into her apartment, his presence filling the room with a sense of calm. "Are you ready?" he asked, his gaze searching hers. Nora looked around at the now empty space, the place that had been her refuge during some of her darkest moments. "I am," she said, and for the first time, she truly meant it. Adrian reached for her hand. "Then let's go." Their flight landed late in the evening, the city lights twinkling like scattered diamonds against the dark skyline. Adrian's home, their home now, was a spacious apartment in the city's heart, its modern design softened by warm touches that reflected his personality. "I hope you like it," Adrian said as he led her inside, setting her suitcase down near the door. "I tried to make it feel welcoming." Nora looked around, taking in the sleek furniture, the art-lined walls, and the cozy reading nook tucked into a corner. "It's perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe this is real." Adrian smiled, pulling her into his arms. "It's real, Nora, and it's just the beginning." Over the next few days, Adrian helped Nora settle in. He introduced her to his favorite spots in the city, a charming cafe that served the best cappuccinos, a park with winding paths and hidden gardens, and a bookstore where the owner greeted him like an old friend. Each place felt like a piece of his life, now shared with her. But it wasn't just the city that felt new. Nora began to see herself differently, too. She found a job at a local firm, and her expertise quickly earned her respect from her colleagues. The confidence she had once buried beneath self-doubt began to resurface, and with Adrian's unwavering support, she started to believe in her strength again. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Adrian reached for her hand. "You've changed," he said, his tone filled with admiration. Nora raised an eyebrow, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Changed how?" "You're more you," he said simply. "The woman I fell in love with was incredible, but this woman? She's unstoppable." Nora's heart swelled. "That's because of you, Adrian. You gave me a reason to believe again." He shook his head. "You've always had that strength, Nora. I just helped you see it." As the weeks turned into months, their life together became a tapestry of shared dreams and quiet moments. They cooked dinner together, danced in the living room to old records, and spent lazy Sundays exploring the city. Every day felt like a celebration of the life they were building, a life filled with love, laughter, and possibility. But despite their happiness, Nora knew there were still challenges ahead. The shadow of her past lingered, a reminder of the pain she had endured. Yet, for the first time, she felt ready to face it, to let it shape her without defining her. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Adrian looked at her with a seriousness that caught her off guard. "I have one more thing to ask you," he said, pulling a small envelope from his pocket. Nora opened it to find 2 tickets, one for her and one for him, to her hometown. "What's this?" she asked, confused. "I want to meet your family," Adrian said. "Your dad, your friends, Claire, especially. I want to know every part of your life, Nora. Because it's our life now." Tears filled her eyes as she realized the depth of his love for her. "You mean that?" she asked. Adrian cupped her face in his hands, his gaze steady. "I've never been more certain of anything." A month later, Nora and Adrian arrived in her hometown. The drive from the airport was quiet but comfortable, with Adrian occasionally glancing at her to ensure she was okay. She was. For the first time in years, returning home didn't feel like stepping back into a shadowed version of herself. It felt like coming full circle. When they pulled into her father's driveway, he was already waiting on the porch, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. Claire was there too, standing with her arms crossed, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Looks like the cavalry's here," Adrian said with a grin, reaching for Nora's hand as they stepped out of the car. Her father greeted them with a nod, his expression softening as he shook Adrian's hand. "You must be Adrian. I've heard a lot about you." "All good things, I hope," Adrian replied, his warmth immediately disarming. Claire, on the other hand, needed to be more formal. She enveloped Nora in a tight hug before turning her attention to Adrian. "So, you're the one who swept my best friend off her feet. I hope you know I'll be keeping an eye on you." Adrian laughed. "I'd expect nothing less." The weekend passed in a blur of shared meals, long conversations, and heartfelt moments. Adrian bonded with Nora's father over their love of classic literature. Claire quickly warmed to him, teasing him mercilessly but approving of how he looked at Nora, as though she were the only person in the world. On their final evening, they sat around the dining table, laughter filling the room. As the conversation died down, Adrian raised his glass. "To Nora," he said, his voice steady, "for her courage, kindness, and how she inspires everyone around her." Nora felt her cheeks flush, but the warmth in Adrian's eyes anchored her. For the first time, she believed his words, not just because he loved her, but because she was beginning to see herself in the same light. Life returned to its rhythm in the city, but something had shifted. The visit to her hometown strengthened Nora's connection to her past while solidifying her future with Adrian. She felt lighter, more grounded, as though she had finally reconciled the different pieces of herself. One Friday evening, Adrian came home with an envelope in hand. "What's this?" Nora asked as he handed it to her. Open it and see, he said, his grin giving nothing away. Inside was a letter confirming the lease on a small studio space downtown. Adrian, what is this? She asked, her voice trembling. It's yours, he said simply. I know you've been talking about starting your consulting firm, and I thought it was time to make that dream a reality. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at him. You did this for me? You've given me so much, Nora. It's the least I can do to show you how much I believe in you. Overwhelmed, she threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. I don't know how I got so lucky. Adrian pulled back just enough to look at her, his expression serious. It's not luck, Nora. It's love. And it's the life we're building together. Months later, Nora stood in her studio, the space alive with energy as she collaborated with her first client. Adrian had been right. Starting her own business had been the right move, and she had never felt more fulfilled. Their life together flourished. Weekends were spent exploring the city or hosting friends for dinner. Adrian's family adored her, and her father and Claire visited often, their bonds growing even more potent. One sunny afternoon, as they strolled through the park, Adrian turned to her. Do you think we should start looking for a house? Nora's heart swelled at the thought. A house? Yeah, he said, squeezing her hand. Somewhere we can build a life. A place for us, and maybe a family? She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. A family? His smile was soft but steady. Someday. Only if you're ready. Nora's response came without hesitation. I am. As they continued their walk, the future stretched before them. A canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of their love, their dreams, and the life they had fought to build. For the first time, Nora wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. She was ready to embrace it all, with Adrian by her side.